Ready, aim, release!
Hello. It's another Monday, right? It's another Monday. It's another Monday, and I'm back. You'll notice that my friend this week, Carlo, isn't here. He is not joining us today. He's having to do some family/friend commitment stuff. So it is just me. So yeah, I have no idea what we're going to talk about, really. I mean, I've got some ideas. That would be lying if I said I didn't have any. But we're just going to take it by ear today and see what happens. Let's get should we get a picture of Carlo going? Because, you know, where would we be without at least a picture of the poor man? Grant says, anyone bring popcorn? I didn't. I brought some, what do you call them? Jesus, roasted peanuts, but I forgot what you call them. Dry roasted, thingy on. Willard's eating popcorn, good. And I've had a haircut. Yes, I've had a haircut. I had a haircut because it was getting far too long, and I was at a wedding over the weekend, so that's the main reason I got a haircut. Cool. Oh yeah, by the way, we don't talk about it very often whatsoever, but for those of you who are watching and have not checked out the NRG Teespring as of late, for those of you who are interested in buying merch, do head over to the Northern Realms Teespring if you do fancy anything. Let's get it up here. There we go. Roasted peanuts are the best, Grant. It's true. Check out all the cool merch. Now, the reason I'm mentioning this is I actually had something arrive last week, so I'll stand up to show you all this fancy one off, which is the classic Mammothol Pivot t-shirt, which I'm happy to finally have. So yeah, do check out all the stuff there. That's not for us, obviously. It's Stats. That's over for Daryl and the boys over at NRG, and the great stuff they make, which is, you know, some of the stuff they make is great. Some of the artwork they make. So anyway, yeah, on with the news of the week. I guess the news of the week being there was no news, as is becoming almost customary now. There's nothing, and I don't mean that as in like, oh god, there's literally nothing, but no one has said anything. You know, the game designers haven't said out anything. There's been no posts from, you know, the main groups or anything like that from any of the designers. Again, you know, we're moving into 120 plus days now of essentially nothing. We saw it the back in the last week, so this was on Friday. The main group posted, the main page on Facebook posted and said that Castle Loyalists, Drowned Men, and Riders of Highgarden are now available in the US. That's been about it. You know, we've still had the odd post around different people doing well at different qualifiers, but so far we haven't really seen anything come out majorly in terms of we haven't seen a list of qualified players generated from CMON at all. There's been no communication at all regarding World Cup, which of course there are now qualifiers for that. So yeah, I guess we'll just wait and see over the next coming weeks if anything happens there. We are certainly overdue a chat from the designers, I think. So we'll see. All right, so I guess that brings me on to the main meat and potato of today then, really, which, if anyone could guess with the name of the episode, we are going to be looking a little bit at Starks, mainly because Starks aren't doing too well. Now, Greyjoys, we could look at Greyjoys. I don't feel qualified enough to talk about Greyjoys. Not suggesting that I am qualified enough to talk about Starks, of course, but at least I've been playing Starks. I haven't been playing Greyjoys, certainly for a long time. So their poor rating, couldn't talk to you about. Although Carlo losing a lot of games with them is, definitely adding to that. Not the major factor, of course. But Starks, where are Starks at? Well, it is now, as of tomorrow, the end of April. Yes, 30th of April today. So tomorrow is the end of April. May, as my partner's just rectified behind me. Jesus, I'm a month out. Clearly, there's something wrong. I'll talk about that in a second, Nicholas. Yes, they do have a positive win rate, just about. They are roughly, keeping track. With a 16% pick rate as well. That's one in 6, a sixth of the player base, which for 7 factions and neutrals is not too bad. There's a decent pick rate, and they'll always be higher picked because, of course, starter box content, and newer players know the Starks from the stories. For those who not massively invested in Game of Thrones, they'll know who perhaps Rod Stark, Eddard Stark, those characters are. But the win rate circulating around about 50%. A bit above, a bit below, depending on the time and what's happening, I think. But yes, Starks. It's not looking brilliant for them, though. And I think there's obviously a lot of discussion around what builds they may or may not have. Eddard being obviously the most popular commander, but not necessarily. I mean, it's certainly the best commander if we look at the options we've got available to ourselves. But he's not hands down like massively shooting above. Great numbers, not far behind at all. But it is, looking down towards the bottom end of that list, the likes of Robb Stark and Roderick Cassell. Oh, that's not good. And if we were to actually shoot down all the way to the bottom of the list nowadays, it is in fact Robb Stark, who is now among one of the worst commanders in the game, with Roderick not far off. I do think Robb's cards are not very good, to put it bluntly. I don't know if he is that good a commander. I personally don't like him. I think his cards don't really do anything that are positive, really, not massively. So, yes, I can understand why he's poor. Now, we do see a lot of Eddard, though. We see a lot of Eddard, and we see a lot of Eddard with lists not too dissimilar to something like this. Eddard's on a guard with something like a 6-point unit, be that Stark Outriders or a Mormont Vet Starksworn Sword unit, or Bowman, or She-Bears, any of those options coming in there. Then usually She-Bears with Rickon Usher is a common pickup, obviously picking up Shaggy Dog and a Starksworn Sword Mormont Vet, kind of taking that last place. There are options, of course, within this to move Rickon and Usher if you really want to. Sometimes we see Starksworn Swords get traded out for Starksworn Swords. Starksworn Swords with the Mormont Vet get traded out for Naked Sworn Swords, giving you an extra point for a 7-point option with that Eddard kind of like shell. But that is the typical thing we see. There's nothing spectacular there. It's all just solid units, and obviously Eddard with his honor guard really pulling up the weight of the majority of the list, with his abilities to kind of like steamroller enemies if you get the Fury of the Fallen to come out in the right way. Now, NCU pickups, we've seen typically Arya, Catelyn, and Baelish as the 3. Baelish loses a lot of potential if you're not running specifically Bowman, because you're not interested in like blocking horses to take swords that often. And there's discussion there as to what fills in that third role. Lyanna hasn't necessarily taken a spot in the Eddard lists. They haven't got the sacrifice really to give Lyanna a huge boost. But Lyanna is of course an option. But more popular is Sansa. Sansa to recover Fury of the Fallen and also Northern Defiance. That's the auto pass within short of Eddard, or a reroll. Very, very popular pickup is Sansa there. Yes, Aaron, I was going to move on to Merc's Rickon Osher, which you'll notice on the, those of you watching live will see on the right-hand side my 9 activation Stark lists, which I'm going to discuss, as I do genuinely think that it's a thing, because certainly one thing that we're going to look at is the struggle that Starks have with certain other factions, specifically Free Folk and Night's Watch in particular. I'm not saying they're great against the likes of Baratheons either, but they're really struggling against Free Folk and Night's Watch at the moment. So yeah, that's the kind of shell of the Eddard list. As you say, Sansa to grab certain cards out is particularly more popular with than Baelish, especially if you're not running Bowman. The Baelish Bowman combo is about the only thing we see as an alternative. If you're running the Stark Outriders or another combat unit, Sansa typically takes the spot. So these lists we've seen do well. Jacob online is doing well with things like this. There are variations on this that people run with things like healing NCUs and stuff. People sometimes shave a point in the list. Maybe he's dropping Mormont She-Bears out. Maybe able to pick up a unit of Tully Cav. That's more similar to a Psycho Steez list. And there's a lot to be said and there's a lot to be gained from these kind of Eddard. Typically 7 or 8. Sometimes we see the 7. But the 8 Eddard list is a very common one that's being picked up and used and does okay. Does fine, right? Eddard is doing well overall in the grand scheme of things. He's doing okay. He's not spectacular, but he certainly is the best pickup for Stark at the moment. Say Great John is a second there, not too far off. And he is decidedly middle of the pack. Now, part of that is being dragged down slightly by Stark's overall performance being poor. Eddard is not massively outperforming Stark's, although he is massively outperforming some of the other commanders in Stark's. But yes, there's Eddard. The Great John Amber lists usually very similar, usually packing maybe it's a 7 or 8 list. Sometimes they're running BBG, sometimes they're running 2 NCUs. Variations on the list obviously exist. I don't really have a standardized Great John list. I feel like Great John is a little bit more tested with in terms of what units work and what don't. But we have seen a lot of Greyjoys mixing in with Tully Cav and Starksworn Swords, or some people going the Berserker route, although Berserker Mormont Vet has very much fallen off in favour. Not popular commander combo at all. So yeah. Now on the topic of units, let's actually have a look at Stark overall. By the way, Osher still coming up in number 1 with a higher rating than Rickon, because some people don't put Rickon in their lists. I don't know why. Sorry, don't put Osher in their Rickon list. Sorry, I don't know why. But yeah. So the worst things you could be taking then at the moment: Karstark Spearman at 6, Bowman not doing particularly well at 6 either. Poor pickups for 6, which is surprising because people think Umber Berserkers are bad at 6. They aren't good. But Berserkers are, outside of the She-Bears, the best performing 6-point unit in Starks at the moment. So that's a thing. That's a thing, right? They are significantly lower than She-Bears, though. She-Bears are by far the most highest performing thing. And some people will sit here and argue Starksworn Swords are the Mormont Veteran. are higher performing than Umber Berserkers, which is probably true. So 6-point unit options and choices there. There isn't much going for you. There really isn't. It's either she-bears or bust. So do consider that. Do definitely consider that when building your lists. Is this really a space for a 6-pointer, or can I take this 6-point and this 5-point and make, or sorry, these two 6-pointers and make one of them a 5 and one of them a 7? Eddard Donnergard is the kind of like the only other one. I do feel that talking about Eddard Donnergard is a bit difficult because obviously he pushes you towards a particular commander and a particular unit, but you'll notice that he's there arguably better rated than the she-bears, and he does pull its weight. The unit does pull its weight. So the other things to mention, obviously Rickon should do very well, and with Shaggy is pulling down wins at a very good rate. He is actually the highest rated unit in the game. The best thing you can do in a Stark list basically at the moment is to put Rickon and Osher in the list and then put Shaggy in. And that's your first unit. And it's like, we haven't even got a unit for Rickon yet, and that's still your best thing that you've done. Arya has been really putting up the numbers. Is the great NCU pickup, but we'll talk about NCUs in a little bit as well. Tully Cavaliers, obviously very good, going down the 8-point route. Now, there is reason to justify, and I did have a list that I wanted to look at here, Steve's relatively low activation list, using his Eddard, looking at the 7 activation list, where he runs the double Tully Cavalier Glory Seekers, then Rickon and Osher picking up Shaggy, then the Caitlyn and Arya NCUs. This has a lot going for it as well. The Tully Cavalier Glory Seeker combo is something we saw out of Baratheons, and them using the Champions of the Stag for a very similar impact or similar effect. But this hits the activations at 7 rather than the 6 that we more commonly see out of the Baratheons. Sometimes those Baratheon lists do run at 7 as well, of course. These are running Eddard on a guard with Eddard, of course. Tully Cavaliers, Glory Seeker, Stormcrow, Mercs, Rickon, Osher, and Shaggy Dog, Arya, and Catelyn filling in the 2 NCU slots. So, is there a lot to be said there? Yes, this list is probably quite good for a 7 activation list. It probably can bulk up into 8, specifically because Eddard and Fury of the Fallen is so prominent, especially with the House Tully Cavaliers as well, bringing in healing into the deck, which is otherwise missing completely in Starks. There's no healing whatsoever, outside of Eddard NCU, which we won't cover. And then bringing that healing in and bringing those 2 tough nuts to crack that also hit like trucks. Is this a good list? Steve does well with it. Is that because the list is good or Steve is good? Steve's very good in the UK. Psycho Steve, if you've not played against him, try and get a game with him online or in person. He's a very good player. Does that mean the list is good? Probably means the list is pretty good. It probably means that he's just also very good. And it's a good player piloting a mediocre list, meaning that he's beating a lot of people because he simply is that good. So, not my cup of tea, not my style, but I understand that this list is potentially quite potent. So it might be a list that you want to try. Great John lists, as I said, the Shaggy combo with the sacrifice wounds into ridiculous dice with Shaggy is very good. Last Stand again with Shaggy, getting these big dice rolls coming out. Very popular, very people enjoy it. So yeah, play around with that if you want to. There is a lot to be said there. Just reading chat. Mickey, stopping playing Free Folk. I am for a bit, Brian. I'll be returning to them mostly in person because I only really own Free Folk. But yeah, I have not. I ditched the wilding look purely for a wedding. It needs to be presentable for. Has the haircut scared off the other presenters, left you flying solo this evening? Yes, Paul. Unfortunately, basically that is the case. It turns out that cutting your hair makes people leave you. And I have indeed inadvertently killed Carlo. I've taken away his power, as we know. That's why he's lost so many games recently. Cut the hair, Carlo loses his power. But that guy in Greek mythology, right? So, 9 activations then. This is something that I think is honestly worth considering. I don't think people play it enough. Now, interestingly, I was coming to this conclusion. I was coming up with this idea myself. Other people have tried it. It's certainly not unique. It's certainly not my thing that I've built. You know, I'm not claiming ownership or anything like that. But it's certainly something I was flirting with. I know that my colleague Dan Durham, he has run the list at 9 to varying degrees of success. He ran a 9 activation at LGT and felt like he did well with it. I think it won the games that he played it in, so he was pretty content with it. Reverse Samson, thank you, Desmond. So yes, the 9 activation lists. I think they have prominence in a game where we're looking at 8 or 9 activations. We already establish early on, and we'll reiterate that establishment now, I think. Starks are not going to out-heal any other faction. Unless you go for this kind of steal list, you're not going to out-heal other factions. You don't have innate healing. Your access to healing is the bags, at Eddard NCU or Tycho, which, you know, everyone has Tycho. That's not a thing that's special. So realistically, we have to be looking at ways of making it so Samson wasn't Greek. There you go. Probably Roman. I am not that familiar with the story of Samson. I do apologize. The overall kind of like strategy of playing these higher activation lists in Starks, in my opinion, is that you are going to be playing into 9s or 8s yourself, which gives you 1 activation at the end of each round, or 1 activation at the end of every other round, to do something important with. Now, with crit blow style units, in Stark Sworn Swords and with She-Bears, there are options for you to be explosive. Now, can you rely on just rolling 6s and not rolling a 1 for the charge? No, that's not a game plan. That is not a strategy. Like, you should not base your entire strategy about, I'm going to blow things up with crit blow. I don't personally think that's a great strategy. But it has merits, and we'll come to that in a second. But we need to get to this point of feeling confident with our list, right? So what I've basically been doing is I will build a list, and I will start by doing the best decision I can. Rickon, Osha, Shaggy. Then I personally, because we're going to 9, I am looking at Bran and Hodor and adding in Summer. Right? So now I know I've got 2 units I need to take, and I've got 8 points in the list currently used. I'm also picking up for this list, knowing it's 9 activations, knowing what the weakness of the list is likely going to be, I'm picking up Lyanna. Lyanna, I am looking at 1, you know, the morale test being good, that's good. The +1 to morale tests, but actually looking at that 2 and 3 slot, or the 1 and 2 slot, sorry. Crit blow on melee units. Well, why am I paying for crit blow on units if I can get it from an NCU with the sacrifice of a dog? So if I can make a dog sacrifice worth it, I'm then getting Stark Sworn Swords for kind of free. That's good. And automatic passing panic tests. This is huge. This is huge because you are playing 9 activations. People will often say, but what about your bad morale? What about Mel? To which point I would say to them, I don't care. I'm not going to out-heal a Mel list with anything in Stark, you know, except maybe the Tully Cavalier type stuff. I'm not going to beat that list by trying to out-heal it. So I'm not even going to bother. I'm just going to go, right, I'm 7 morale, maybe I'm 8 morale. Maybe I'm 6 morale because I've got Weirwoods. Maybe I'm 5 morale because I've got Rick on Usher and Lyanna. And then, yeah, you make me test at 7 or 8, and we'll play the casino game. I don't care. I'm going to lose units. But I then circle back round to, right, well, the 2 dogs are now no longer my missiles. These are my units to win the game with. Mel's not going to kill these guys. Unlikely, right? If your opponent is melling the dogs on early rounds and gets a kill, then that's sadness. If your opponent is melling dogs in the hope of getting a kill and not killing your units, I think you're fine. So, your dogs become your carry. Is that a problem? Is this a good thing? Yes, because your dogs can now gain crit blow with Lyanna Mormont. Is that particularly amazing? No. Is it pretty good with Shaggy? Yes. 7 dice with crit blow on a dog is suddenly very scary. So there's a synergy there that we can look at. Alternatively, that 3+ rerolling any attack die, that is not assigned to just melee attacks. That is assigned to ranged attacks as well. And this builds us towards a list, or should get you thinking, well, bowmen or range units. Bowmen suck. So we go to the only other range unit we have access to, realistically, inside the base Stark set, which is the Cranagman Trackers. We'll invest those in. Traps are very good. Traps are very, very good. And I'm saying that as a free folk player, where automatic damage is great. Now, let's talk about that for a second. Stark Bowman in at 6, they're a point more. What are you gaining? What are you losing? Well, 7 dice on 4+ is different to 7 dice on 3+. 7 dice on 4+ is approximately 3.5 hits, let's say 3 to 4. 7 dice on 3+ is circulating at 66%, right? So we're talking 4 to 5. More commonly on the 4 end. But that 5, it's not unreasonable at all. So the 3-4 split versus the 4-5 split, that means you're doing 1 more hit. Through armor saves, that's going to be against low armor, of course. That's more likely to be 1 extra wound. Against high armor, it averages a lot less than that. It could be 1 extra wound, though. Let's approximate it to be 1 extra wound. So every time the bowmen shoot, we are, at best, getting 1 extra wound. Okay. You've got 6+ armor, which is exactly the same as bowmen. So you're not paying any more for defensive saves. The morale saves, 7+. No different. And then you say, oh yeah, but bowmen are longer and they can shoot through terrain and things like that. Yeah, that has some effect. But then I would argue hidden traps. That's 4 auto hits on a full health unit, or 3 auto hits, or 2 on a solo. That has a huge boon, because 4 auto hits on a low armor unit is likely 3 wounds on a 5+. 3 wounds is predictable as an outcome. So that's pretty good. Pretty good when the difference between bowmen and trackers was 1 wound every shot. So hidden traps is now actually better than Stark Bowman. You're paying 1 less, and you've got, in theory, every round a higher damage output. Now, yes, you don't get to use hidden traps on units engaged, but that is the ethos of the list, right? We don't want to be shooting into melee if we can avoid it. Again, more on that later. So we're not building our list to do that. So we've got a unit that's outperforming a 6-point unit, and it's faster. It's a point faster. It's got 6 movement over the bowman of 5. Okay, there's a 1 dice drop off on 2 ranks, but it even hits decently in melee. Now, why does hitting on a 4+ matter with melee compared to the bowman hitting on the 5s with a 5-4-3 versus the 6-4-3? Well, this is huge. Okay? There is not a single card in the deck of Starks that promotes the use of ranged units. Winter's Might does jack shit. Northern Ferocity does jack shit. Day of Impact does jack shit. North Remembers does jack shit. Winter is Coming does jack shit. Assault Orders does jack shit. None of those 6 cards, of the 7 base cards, promote the use of Bowman. 2-free position allows the use of range units in a different way. It is a positive use towards Bowman, but it's also just a good card. It is good for anything that wants to change alignment, get into flanks, get out of a non-charge position, anything like that. It's not significantly better on range units than it is on melee units. It's just a good card. So we don't have anything in the deck that promotes the use of ranged. So I don't want to overinvest into range either. But Cranags on 6 dice on 4s, okay, they lose crit blow, but hang on, 6 dice on 4s is still just Darksworn Swords with 1 less dice. Right? In fact, it is exactly the same profile as Darksworn Swords, just with 1 less dice on all ranks. Now 1 less dice is significant, and yes, they don't have crit blow. But do they not? We just talked about it before, Lyanna, right? Lyanna gives crit blow where we want it. And we're taking Lyanna to the boards to take swords because we're Starks, on every given opportunity we can, or Lyanna onto bags to heal because we're Starks and we don't have any healing at every given opportunity that we can. Or we're taking Baelish onto horses, doing something there, if we're taking Baelish. So I don't care that I don't come with native crit blow. Okay. We're getting there. Okay, defensively, Darksworn Swords are up there. You know, I can't compare the defenses. Darksworn Swords are just simply better in the defense aspect of the game. But Cranaman Trackers are really significantly better than Stark Bowman if we look at the deck and if we look at the stats and the damage output that they're trying to put out. So, that's my justification behind Cranaman Trackers, as much as it is long and winded and people are fed up with it. So, the other option we've got, if we want to be as lean as we possibly can in list building. Remember, activations are key and paramount to what we're trying to achieve with this build, being a counter Night's Watch / counter Free Folk. Stormcrow Mercenaries with adaptive, coming in, yes, without crit blow, but we've just talked about crit blow. They are 1 morale worse than Darksworn Swords. For all other intents and purposes, they might as well be Darksworn Swords. And they come with Motivated by Coin for more attacks, which we might want, especially if we're talking Bran and Hodor for an extra wound. Rickon and Osher in this unit makes it unit Darksworn Swords without Winter's Bite. Fine. Cool. Let's move on. This has value. Remember, the core basis of the list is we are not wanting to engage in melees unless we actually want to take a melee option. We're looking to grind an opponent out, to wear them down, remove their wounds, and kill units when we can. That's the purpose of the list. So, let's go back to it. We've got these core. We've picked up Lyanna. We might go away and decide to pick up Baelish now. Baelish is obviously a very good NCU and very, in my opinion, classic to running these kind of Cranagman core, which you'll notice I haven't added to the list still. And this is because I think that the next most important decision that we can make is the commander option. Before I decide what these units are that Bran and Rickon are running in, and where I'm boosting these things, I have to decide what commander I'm running. Because the commander choice I have is going to dictate the style of 5-point units I'm going to pick up. So, I've not run it, ironically. I've not run it with Howland yet. I'm not running Howland because I didn't need a Howland badge. I already have Howland for the badges. I do think Howland is going to be a very good choice. I think Howland is a very good choice, straight up. Not even he's going to be good. I think he's probably very good. But I'm willing to sit here and say to you today that I don't know if Howland is a good choice. So investigate that one on your own. However, I'm looking at Brynden, and I'm going, does Brynden do anything? And the short answer is no. I don't hate the Blackfish. He's not good. personally, I don't think he's that good. Warcry on activation is just sad. I hate Warcry on activation. Set for charge memeing with Stormcrow Dervishes is nice, but it makes the list so unbelievably lean at 9. You're running Brynden in Dervishes, you're running probably 3 NCUs at 4 points apiece, so that's 12s and 7, 19. You're running the Rickon, Osher, Bran, Hodor, Summer, Shaggy system there, and you're taking Stormcrow Mercenaries to reduce the costs there. So there's another 16 points in those 2 NCUs. 19 and 16 leaves us 5 points left. Yes, you managed to pick up a naked unit of Cragman Trackers, or Starksworn Swords, or you can't even run Cutthroats. You don't have the points for Cutthroats in neutrals. You're probably picking up... I mean, you could run Castlight Loyalists, but you're probably picking up Starksworn Swords or Cranigs. And if you're running the 9, I would prefer the Cranigs. And then you're running not Baelish, because you can't afford Baelish with neutral tax allowance. You're at 17 already. Baelish will take you to 21. So you're not even running a neutral NCU. Do I think Brynden is good for the 9 activation list? Therefore, not really. I ran it today, actually. Of all days, I ran it earlier today. Yeah. I wouldn't rate it. So, let's abandon Brynden for now. Howland, as I said, untested, might be worth checking out. Does Eddard work with this list? Probably, actually. Yeah, Eddard is probably a very good option for this list. Because Eddard's a very good commander. You still have the points allowance to run the Honor Guard if you want to run the Honor Guard. And there is opportunity to kind of like let Eddard go and just go and kill things. I haven't played it. I have built the list. I think it would work. And I think that as a core concept, people should go out there and try that. I think Howland and Eddard will both work fine with this. And I do think it has merits. So try that out. Tell me how it goes. Great number with this list. Yes, there is some play. The problem with Great Umber is I do not want to invest in Berserkers. That means I've got 1 Umber unit. Where does it mean I'm playing Berserker Tactics? Well, Berserker Tactics is going to be used on Shaggy. It's going to be used on Great John's unit. It might be used with Bran and Hodor's unit to do kind of like 3, 4, 5 auto wounds. Bang. I do quite like Great John in the list, especially if you're running into quite a heavy giant-esque or Baron lists, Blind Baron from Greyjoy. If you're running to metas like that, yes, Berserker Tactics a brilliant card to removes mag from the game with Bran and Hodor, where you just go in and right, I'll roll 7 dice on 4s with you, bang, and then you go, okay, well that's 7 dice on 4s, and you go, yeah, and take 1 wound from Bran and Hodor, and then take another 4 wounds from Berserker Tactics. So your 6 wound giant just took 5 wounds automatically. Good luck. If that is the meta you're struggling into, then that is the play. If you're not running into those kind of metas and where giants aren't as applicable, then Grey John probably is not necessarily the best pickup. You do have the wound allowance, and you do have Shaggy Dog to do the combos there. You do have the opportunity as well, because of the nature of what this list does in terms of wearing players down. You do actually have a Reckless Heroism into Overrun setup, because you're talking about units on half health, and you can get Great John Umber in to go bang, 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 kill 1 unit, overrun into another unit. Perhaps you can kill that unit as well. Try it, is all I can say there. I don't know if you're going to be able to get that reliably and regularly, especially if we talk about the free folk, maybe Greyjoy opponents that you're looking to face with these style lists. But it is worth a consideration if you are interested in doing it. Lash Out is fine. Is absolutely fine. You know, most things won't one-shot other things. They will leave you on bad health because you've got shit morale and shit armor saves on the majority of stuff. They might do 2 ranks to you. So lashing out has power, but you're not Umber and anything, so you don't care. And Last Stand is a good card, but you're using it with Shaggy, or you're probably using it with like a Bran Hodor unit. You're not that interested in running it in most else places. Rob, I'm just going to tell you now, I think he's shit. Don't bother looking at him. I like to think running this list with 3 Wolves, with Rob Commander and things like this would make the list better. I don't think it does. I think it just makes the list worse. I don't think Rob is a good commander. Roderick, I don't think Roderick is good either. I did run a variation with Roderick in Bowman as the kind of core unit, and it is nice. I misplayed the game slightly against Suster, and as a result, he then played the game well on his end and capitalized on my mistake, thus meaning the game fell away from me in Fire and Blood. Do I think the list is okay? Yes. Do I think the list is the best version of the list? No. I don't think Roderick is good enough. Combat Prowess feels like a good card. It's not. Martial Superiority feels like a good card. It is, but it's telegraphed usually. Pressing Advantage is fine, actually, with Cranags, but you suffer a huge amount from putting tokens out in Starks, so you kind of need the She-Bear core and the Bowman core to get the 3 tokens and things like that. And all of a sudden, you're now talking about a lot of token gen and 12 points invested in the list, which is almost impossible to fit into the list while running the other core concepts we've already discussed. So, yes, you can do it with Roderick. I don't think it's good. Outrider Commander will shelve him. He's not the kind of list he appears in. Maeve Mormont? Yes. I believe this list works with Maeve Mormont. I think I'm insane. The problem is you're waiting on a ruling. Support of Bear Island mixed with Here We Stand is very fucking good. If the opponent has no counterplay style, like counter strategy, counter plot, or Roost Commander, support of Bear Island with Here We Stand is stupid. You can set Shaggy to 1 wound at an early stage in the game, do an Assault Orders charge with him, hitting someone with full souped up Shaggy, and then if they try and kill him, you Here We Stand, and now he has to make a morale test on a 2+ to not die. Now, the thing is with a morale test on 2+, you can't fail that unless they've got Intimidating Presence or Corpse Piles. That's pretty good. You can make an unkillable dog for a round. Now, the reason I say this could be really good to the extent of being broken, if we are waiting on an FAQ ruling, to be honest. If Here We Stand can be used at the end of the round when Shaggy would die from Here We Stand being removed, so you kind of chain Here We Stand with Here We Stand, then you run Sansa in this list, you copy Here We Stand after Here We Stand, you try and get them both out of your deck as early as you possibly can, and just chain Here We Stand, Here We Stand, Here We Stand, and you just use Shaggy as a roadblock for the entire game. And unless your opponent has something that they can deal with that with, they just simply lose. I personally believe that if you've got an unkillable Shaggy, then your opponent shouldn't be winning, especially if you've got 9 activations against them. Because bear in mind, every time Shaggy attacks with Assault Orders charging and makes his melee attacks, that's 7 dice Vicious Sundering. And you can even add Crit Blow onto that by sacrificing some, like Summer, away to add Crit Blow onto that attack. And that can be happening more than once per round. You should not be losing that kind of game. But Here We Stand might not allow that. Here We Stand might not work that way, which is why I say we're waiting for a ruling for that to be confirmed. If it is confirmed and you can do that, or if you can't do it, it's less of an issue. It is slightly less egregious. You can do it. Oh my god. Yeah, I'm going to be doing that a lot. And then we're looking for Rickard. Now, Ricard we look at and we go, Ricard's not great. Fueled by Slaughter, superior numbers, taunt on a card. Need for Vengeance, cast out Retribution. I don't hate it. I don't hate it because you're 9 activations. 9 activations means that your opponent has to activate before you. That means that you can taunt them before you've activated. That means that you can leverage the position of a taunted unit. So, I do think Ricard has play, and I do think taunt in a 9 activation list will work for you in your favour. This is again not a meme. Here, I'm not. I can't believe I'm saying it. Taunt, not a meme. It has play. Do I think it's amazing? No. But it's good enough. And that's what we're looking for. Good enough. Ricard's Stark's interesting as well. The Fueled by Slaughter is healing. It keeps him high on wounds, something which we've discussed already. Stark's lacking. And superior numbers with the rerolls is important. Especially considering that we can afford to we can put bogs down. And we've got Crowningman trackers that are going to appear in the list. So we can trap enemy units, reducing their ranks. So hang on, if they're reduced ranks, and we're charging into them, and we're charging over bogs, losing our rerolls, but we have superior numbers, we get our ranks back. We get our rerolls. We didn't need anything else to give us rerolls. We don't need card synergy. We don't need anything else. That's pretty good. I like that. Need for Vengeance is fine. Again, not a meme with this list. It is a bit of a meme, but you can Need for Vengeance with Ricard Karstark. Get him a second attack after that last activation charge. He's going to open the round with an attack before your opponent can do anything. Hey, if he had superior numbers when he made the attack before, he's going to make that same attack with superior numbers again. And he's probably going to kill a unit if he just chained 2 attacks together. And that means he's got 2 attacks with rerolls in whatever unit he's in, one of them getting a +1 to hit. This is actually starting to look like a combo that can work. Okay? So, we should be looking at that and saying that's not a meme. Cast out Retribution coming out is fine. It's extra healing. It is something that's worth playing. It's something that's going to keep your Karstark engine, and specifically what is a low healing deck, a little bit more in the game. Do I think it's amazing? No. Is it good enough? Yes. And that's all that matters. If it's good enough. So, Ricard Karstark becomes a genuine option. So, after all that, long story short, after like 15 minutes just about commanders, right? Ricard, Maeve Mormont, probably Great John, Howland and Eddard are the 5 commanders you should be looking at for this list. If you've got an Eddard list or a Great John list as your kind of alt list, or your other list in the pair, then you're probably looking at not running them again in a 2-match pair up. Probably running Eddard as the main, so probably looking at Great John here. You might want to try Howland, but Maeve and Ricard are definitely worth considering. Maeve is probably on the bottom of the pile. So, I'm going to stick in Ricard for now, but I will talk about the implications of that later on. So, at this point, I know I've got points left, and I have to go back to my NCUs and pick up Arya. I think Arya is very strong. Arya is one of the best NCUs in Starks right now. Free movements are good. You're running an infantry list, use Arya. So, Arya makes the cut. Like we've discussed, you might want to run Baelish as your 3rd NCU, or realistically your other option is going to be Sansa. Caitlyn, although it seems appealing and it gives you the token play and all this that, Caitlyn is probably not the option that you're looking to take. I know that sounds kind of like heinous because a lot of people say, Caitlyn is like the core of what Starks do and kind of like a massively picked NCU that people love all the time, but it's just not really the point of what the list is trying to achieve. So I don't look at Caitlyn. You can do if you wish. For now, we can, but it can be swapped out for Baelish. So We haven't even put a unit in there. We haven't even put a solid unit in our list yet, and we're at 20 points. We're halfway there. I know I'm reaching 9. I've got 3 and I've got 5, which means I have exactly 20 points to make up 4 activations. Now, 20 divided by 4, strange enough, is 5, so I've got 4 5-point options. Now, it's a little bit of a lie, because I can add in Stormcrow Mercenaries to either Bran and Hodor and Rickon to give me up to an extra 2 points, so that's 22 points. 22 points allows for a 7-5-5-5 or a 6-6-5-5. Now, with She-Bears being so prominent, She-Bears might be the pick that you're looking to go for. And with a Rickard list or with a Maeve list, She-Bears are good. I do think She-Bears are worth considering. The She-Bears, very good unit at 6. If you're running an Eddard list or combo, you're looking to put Eddard in the list, of course. Eddard's Honor Guard would make the list. Roderick, I do think, has play with bows, but maybe She-Bears might be better. You can see where all of that kind of plays out. I'm now going to fill the list into what I believe worked for Rickard, and that is running him in Starksworn Swords, running Rickon Osher into the Crannogman, Bran into the Crannogman, and Carstark Loyalists coming in at the 4th pick. Okay, we want that second Carstark unit to kind of like uphold the line a little bit. The attack profile is not much different to Starksworn Swords. You've got Lyanna for crit blow, making Starksworn Swords plus with precision, and it's got a little bit more healing with Perseverance and Valor. I do think Carstark Loyalists make the list, and they are exactly the same as Starksworn Swords defensively and attack profile wise and movement wise elsewhere. So I do think that that's an option for us. So the list looks a little bit like this in the end, with Starksworn Swords Rickard, Crannogman Rickon, Shaggy, Crannogman Bran, Summer, Carstark Loyalists, Lyanna, Arya, Caitlyn. Alternatives, the Mage list, something like this. Starksworn Swords with Maeve, Crannogman with Rickon, Stormcrow Mercs making the 4th pickup with Mira, giving you 3 traps, and the 2 dogs, Lyanna, Arya, and Peter in this list. Do you think you could probably change that out for Caitlyn? And we have not those ones. We have the other 9 version, which I had. The Great John version of the 9, which I do think could probably need a change. But something like Great John in Starksworn Swords, Rickon in Crannog, Bran in the Stormcrows. Picking up Rob in Crannogman in this list, I don't like this anymore. I'd probably move this out and put that in as She-Bears. You could even add She-Bears to Great John. And then you pick up the 4-point NCU. In this case, we would pick up Lyanna. So, look a bit like that with Great John in Starksworn Swords or She-Bears. Crannogman Trackers with Rickon Osher. Stormcrow Mercs, Bran, Hodor, Shaggy Dog, Summer, and She-Bears. I personally would probably put Great John in the She-Bears and move the Starksworn Swords to be another 5-point unit Crannogman. So there we go. 9 activation Starks. I don't know why I was going through it. I do believe that that is an interesting thing that people should check out. I do believe that it pushes down on what is okay in Starks at the moment. You'll notice that basically nothing that I pick up is below rated positively in the rankings currently. Crannogman Tracker's coming in at 15 on the list of just Stark stuff. I do think that that might be the way to go. What are we avoiding? Well, we are avoiding, unfortunately, Stark Bowman. We're avoiding Roderick Cassell, the NCU. He's not as good as people think. Summer is the only weakness that we have in the list with Bran and Hodor. I personally believe it's the best way to get to 9. I don't believe there's a way of getting to 9 without Bran and Hodor, without running Rob, and I don't want to run Rob. So Bran and Hodor realistically is the only other option. So we are a bit pushed into that. But then realistically, the Loyalists potentially that we're picking up as an option, but as I said, I think it's only in 1 or 2 variants that you'd pick them up, and then everything else that we're looking at is looking at the more positive end of the game. So that's the thoughts behind my Starks and what I was doing with it. It is working. Now that might just be me rather than the lists being actually that good. I do think it's worth considering though, so do give it a check. God, I've talked for ages about that. Whew. The other thing we've got to talk about and that has done the rounds today, I guess, is the use of clocks in the game. I'm going to allow Carlo to elaborate on clocks more next week. So there's a bit of a kind of like a sneak peek of what we're going to cover next week. Clocks are going to be the main area of discussion. And I do believe that clocks are probably necessary. They shouldn't be, but they probably are necessary if we're looking at, competitive play at a high level. And that's simply because, we basically, Carlo came to the conclusion, and I don't disagree, that if you give someone an infinite amount of time, then generally speaking, if you give someone an infinite time, they will spend longer on their moves because there's simply no reason not to. There's always benefit for spending longer to making sure that the thing that you're doing is actually right. In a similar vein for chess, chess, if you remove the time limit from chess, the longer you spend working out a line, the better your result is typically going to be. Yeah, simple idea, basic concept. The longer you have, the better, the better that your play could be. But that doesn't make you a better player. It just means that it allows you more time to think about the move and make a better move. So clocks are necessary in order to get games finished within time allowances and to make sure that there is actually progress. Now, I'll let Carlo elaborate on it more next week. But the purpose of the clock depends a lot on what your community is trying to do with it. If you want games to finish, then the clock is there to make people play faster and finish a game in a given time. If you're not concerned with games finishing, but you just want to make sure that games progress, then the clock is there to make progress in a game. Fundamentally, they might not sound that different, but they are very different objectives and hugely impact the implementation of the clock. If you want people to finish games, and you're saying in a tournament, everybody's game will finish in 2 hours, then people can talk about death clocks. If someone runs out of time, the game is over and they lose. That is fine. That is quite common in other kind of games out there. Chess uses something very similar, but they also have lots of obviously variations in chess. Some chess variations use move limits, and it's like, well, if you didn't make progress in a certain number of moves, it's a draw. If you don't reach a certain position, a certain kind of like limit beyond a certain point, it's a draw. Some people say, right, if you've got 2 hours to play the round or 2 hours to play the game, and if you can't, if there's not enough material on the board for one player to win, then we'll end it as a draw on timeout. But if there's enough material on the board for somebody to win, and you run out of time, then somebody loses. The person who runs out of time loses. That works. The other side of it, the making sure that time is split equally and that players progress through the game fairly and equally, as West Coast is saying in chat there, is to ensure that players are allowed equal time, or roughly equal time. Now, the reason you have to say equal time is that nobody in the history of anything ever takes the same amount of time to do something as somebody else, right? It's not about having a 2-hour game where both players get 1 hour. That's not actually good, healthy, or useful, really, for the game. Because all you're saying there, it's an option that people can take if they wish to, but all you're really saying there is you have 2 hours to play, which is the same as saying just it's a death clock, right? There is a winner in 2 hours. How you decide that is based on how you play. The purpose of having clocks, if you want people to take the same amount of time, notice, I'm not saying the purpose is for the game to finish. Yes, we want games to finish. Everyone wants games to finish. But if that isn't the purpose of adding the clocks, if you're not adding the clock for the game to then have to finish, the clock is simply there to allow players a formal way of discussing the social contract, which is the speed of the game. If somebody takes 5 more minutes than somebody else, that really is not a big deal. In my opinion, that's not important. 5 minutes is here nor there in a 2-hour game, right? You have rules discussions that go for 5 minutes. You have discussions about all kinds of things that go for 5 minutes. 5 minutes is neither here nor there. So a 5-minute difference between two people's clocks towards the end of the game is also not something I would ever penalise or punish. That's just two people playing the game at roughly equal speeds. One person might simply have more actions or more activations on the board. If they have more things, it's going to take them longer. You can't penalise somebody for taking an equal amount of time per action, but simply having more actions. That's not fair. Now, could you argue that that punishes those styles of lists? If you did say that, well, yes. You could say, yes, you spent 5 more minutes longer than your opponent, therefore we're going to punish you because you ran a list that takes a long time to do its thing. No. That's adding another factor into the game, which, how long does this list take to play, that I don't think players want, and nobody particularly wants to deal with. I personally don't consider how long it takes to play my list when I'm building it. I build my list because I think it's good. I then play it as fast as I possibly can within the given scenario, and as fast as I feel is comfortable for me to play that as well. However, if you do want chess clocks to mean that equal time is shared, what is the limit? Now, if we're saying in a 1 hour and 45 game, and this was what Carlo would argue, and we'll hear Carlo's side of it all next week, and he'll really elaborate on this a lot more. But he was simply suggesting that in a 1 hour and 45 game, the worst case scenario, if you give both player 1 hour, is that one player takes 15 minutes longer than the opponent. In a 1 hour and 45 minute game, that one player takes up 1 hour and 1 hour, while the other player takes up 45 minutes. Is a 15-minute difference between two players in a 1 hour and 45 minute game a significant enough difference in time play to say that one player was significantly ahead of the other? No, I don't believe so. I believe that if both players are within a 10-minute difference, then that's just down to lists and a couple of key decisions. I don't believe that that is a significant difference. I don't believe that 15 minutes is a significant difference either. So, yes, I don't believe that going through and saying that having 5 or 10 or 15 minutes even difference on the clock is a significant issue. If it was 20 minutes or 30 minutes, 30 minutes, all of a sudden, a 30-minute difference is somebody taking an hour and 10, give or take, and somebody else taking about 40. It's rough, obviously. It doesn't quite work nicely. That's a problem. That's actually a problem because now somebody's almost spent double the amount of time. Almost. That's an issue, right? Because you're now moving to a point where we're almost talking a 1/3 of the time was my game and 2/3 of it was yours. And that is an issue. Whereas if we're in the much closer 15-minute difference, we're talking like maybe, what is it work out to be, an hour to 43. So yeah, we're talking like 3/7 to 4/7. Like that really is, like, that's null and void, right? That's really here nor there. But 1/3 to 2/3 is significant. So that's the point of adding the clocks, was the kind of gist of what Carlo was trying to get at, is that you should be adding the clocks so that players make good progress, but also so that time is equally divided. Does it matter if a game is not finished at round? A game doesn't reach 6 rounds before the end of an hour and a half, 3/4? Not really. It should. All games should, but realistically, not all games will. Not every game out there will end in that period of time. Okay? And as a result, you shouldn't penalise players, and I do mean players, both players should not be penalised for not reaching the end of their game. If one player is playing significantly slower than the other, then though, that is an issue. So that's why Carlo suggested an hour each and 1 hour 45-minute time slots. We'll see what people's opinions are. We'll probably get some comments about it. I don't hate it myself. I think that is just as good, if not the same as kind of the system we currently have, but at least it's got it monitored. Hilo, you say in chat, the thing you miss with those lots of units is it takes longer to kill them. Horde armies make those same arguments years ago and were wrong. What? So because it takes longer to kill them, it means it takes more time to kill them? I don't know what you mean by that, because yes, it takes longer to kill them, but you're doing less actions if you've got less units. It's as simple as that. It doesn't take longer to do an action. It takes longer to do more actions. The length of an action is roughly equivalent in all circumstances. It can be averaged. If you're doing more actions per turn, your average turn length will be higher. It's as simple as that. It doesn't matter how long it takes to kill units. It's an irrelevant point in my opinion. Craig, it seems pretty obvious why a clock would be added. Where it breaks down for me is the particular details of how that would be implemented. The logistics of the problem as I see it. Yeah, so I mean, it's never a nice thing to introduce anything new. So that is, yeah, sure, that is a difference. That is a slight difference. And it is a difference for a lot of people playing the game initially. It will be something people would have to get used to. And that just come down with time. Without going in too deep into it, there is a whole discussion around social contract, right? But what you want to avoid is you want to avoid fast play where people miss triggers, because that happens and is just as bad, if not worse, than taking more time. If somebody doesn't allow you to say da-da-da, then that would happen. Then that's just not good. So you want to have this opportunity. The way I would see using it myself, I've not really massively taken part in watching people play with clocks, but the way I would foresee it is I would go, right, I am going to start my turn. I have no start turn triggers, and I'd hit the clock. And if my opponent is listening to me, which they should do, they would then see, right, I'm now making a decision if I want to start a turn play or not. And if they say no, well, then they can just like almost immediately hit the clock back and be like, oh, no, boom. That took less than a second most of the time. No time was wasted there. There's no issues. That is not... The transition doesn't have to be that smooth. As long as both players are playing the game and doing triggers in the right way and like calling out what's happening at each round, then the clock doesn't become an issue. It would be difficult for people to start playing with those just out of the blue. I do think people would have to get used to it, but I don't see that being a major issue. Abisky is saying it's 25% or 33% difference depending on perspective. Yeah, in terms of time. If I get 45 minutes and you get an hour, you spent 33% more time than me. Yes, that is true. You did spend longer. You did spend an extra 15 minutes. But that's within the realms of what we would consider normal and allowable play, right? If someone spent 15 minutes longer than you across the whole game, that isn't a significant difference, you know? Especially if, you know, that is the whole game. That someone spent 15 minutes across the whole day, I would say it. Cameron then says, the way you describe it is how I imagine it would work, but has every possible trigger state been added to the game? Strictly speaking, no, but yes. Right? everything is a potential trigger, right? But there are triggers that are simply more common. For example, start of turn, very common trigger at the moment in the game. Unit activation is a trigger against Lannisters. People should know that. We're talking competitive end here. People should know that an activation of a unit is a trigger. Taunt, among other things, and also Lannister. A lot of Lannister cards and abilities work on that. So, a start of activation trigger, yes. Activating NCU. There are tons of triggers in the game that work off when an NCU activates. So you pretty much every single time go, activate an NCU, are you doing something? So yes, there is a lot to be said there. Do you think you need a delay or to smooth over the transition between players with tactics cards? Potentially, Lucas. I don't think with the method we've suggested there that would be significant an issue. Do you think that adding a clock is off-putting to new players though? Yes, Doug. Yes. You still want new players to feel like they can attend tournaments and events? Yes, Doug. I do agree that adding a clock in is not necessarily brilliant for a new player experience, but we aren't addressing the new player experience here. It's specifically the higher level end. I do think if you made it standard that you have a clock, that the new player experience would be only ever so slightly less, only ever so slightly impacted, not majorly. I don't think adding a clock, people don't say because there's a clock in chess that a huge number of people don't play chess because there's a clock, right? I think of all the things in playing chess, the clock is probably one of the few things that people really consider that much when they're getting into the game. There definitely something needs to be practiced with. Having tried them in other systems, it's very easy, especially early on, to forget to switch. It is Hibiscus, it is. And, that is something that ultimately comes with practice. As is the case, when chess being the best example of this, literally people do forget in chess when they're first starting out. It's one of the few things that they learn, and then they get so good at it that it doesn't become an issue anymore. The chess is like the clock. They use the clock as a resource, but forgetting to change the clock is not that common. Yeah, that's where it stands, and that's where I kind of I don't disagree there that opinion of clocks or that implementation of clocks would be a bad thing. I don't like games not finishing. However, I am abundantly aware that not every game can, and not every game will. I don't think we should punish players for not finishing games either. I fundamentally don't think that punishing a player for not finishing is a problem, as long as both players have felt they've got roughly equal time in the game. Yes, if someone spent 2 hours deciding their first start of turn trigger and then won for points on the board, yes, that's obviously dumb. But if both players have spent an hour in the game and they've reached the end of round 1, and both players believe they spent an hour, on the clock, then yes, that's not a good thing. I won't promote that. But I don't think that that's something I should sit here and say to them like, oh, well, that game, that person should have lost because they spent longer, or that game, that person's clock ran out 2 seconds before the other guys did, or anything like that. No, I just think that that's the speed those two players wanted to play at. And as much as I would not want to play at that speed, that's not my game to play. It's their game. They were playing it. Why should I dictate the speed of the game they play? As long as both opponents are happy with the speed that they're playing at, then that is fine. It's when there's a disparity between the speeds where there's an issue. In chess, your opponent's penalised when you accidentally do stuff on your time. How would you handle an opponent doing stuff on your turn before they hit the clock? Or what do you mean doing stuff on your turn? Doug, I would just think there are a lot more people who would be trying to be put off trying to enter a game or gaming event with a clock than there are people who are put off feeling they were slow played. Yeah, I do agree. I don't think this whole slow play discussion affects that many people. And yes, The difference is at the moment, Doug, you can say you mention it to the TO, but there's nothing that can be done because essentially there's no evidence. Right? It's just I feel I'm being slow played. There's nothing. That's nothing can be done by that really. So yeah, that's the purpose of adding the clock in. So yeah, that's chess clocks anyway. Chess clocks. I'll let Carlo kind of like expand on that a lot more next week with his ideas of how he would use it and how it would be implemented. We are, well, I think personally that we're going to run a TTS event with chess clocks for patrons of stats in the near future. So if you are interested in getting in on that, just drop us a message or let us know in the Discord and things like that that you want to. But we are going to be running an event, I think, for TTS based around those systems. Yes, Cameron, completely agree. Slow play has an outside impact on higher level play. Most lower level competitors will neither encounter nor deliberately slow play. Completely agree. I actually don't know if I've ever met someone who deliberately slow plays. Me and Tom played a game that only went to round 2 at Durham. I don't believe that either of us deliberately slow played the other. I believe that both of us just played a slow game. I wasn't happy that we only played 2 rounds at the end of the game. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, I'm impressed that we only played 2 rounds or something like that. I won because I won because I managed my time better than Tom. No, nothing like that. We played 2 rounds because that was the speed of the game we played. We both said we played too slowly. That's an issue that both of us have to then fix. But we both played other games that weekend that mostly went to conclusions. So yeah. Yeah, you will encounter people who deliberately slow play. Yeah, it's a thing. People will slow play. I don't believe people will slow play that often unless you make it competitive, because I don't believe there's an advantage unless people trying to win by slow playing, and people are only trying to win if it's competitive. It's one of those cases where slow playing is actually, it is beneficial for certain players and certain list types or whatever. I don't believe that it's anything. I don't believe that anybody in Song that I've ever played has intentionally done it. So yeah, I think that's the big one. So anyway, yes, that's where it is. At the moment, that's my ramblings on Starks. Forgive me if you think I'm talking a load of bollocks. If you're a Stark player and you play a lot of Starks and you think everything I said was a load of rubbish, then let me know. Because it may well have been. So just shout at me violently on text. I do talk a lot of rubbish. Usually Carlo has to put up with it, but unfortunately, it was you guys alone tonight. So events-wise, let's have a look at some of the things that event we had. The NorCal Primer that ran, which was Trash Panda, Bats, Joe winning it with his Night's Watch, which is fantastic to see. Scabman had his charity event where he played 3 rounds of ELO, or 3 rounds of games against his wife, who played a mixture of lists and things like that. But they went. Oh, Scabman went 3 for 3. Fair enough. Funny enough, his wife does actually beat him relatively regularly, I've heard. Tobo Mott won the ELO event. Tobo Mott, for those of you who don't know, is a name from a while back. Tobo actually won the World Cup that we hosted online. And yeah, he was also the guy behind Mott's Armory, the Kickstarter thing, project that unfortunately didn't make it through various reasons. But player we have not heard from in a while. It's good to see him back in the game. So let's have a look at what other tournaments are coming up. What have we got? We have got En Route to the Citadel, which is starting as of right now. Those of you who are interested can check up on Galantil and what he is running with the French community. They are streaming on Twitch, strangely enough. Streaming on Twitch, eh? They are streaming at www.twitch.tv/Galanthil. Link in the chat. They are streaming the announcements and kind of like the lists and things. I think they're going through all the various different aspects there. On. Let's have a look. Let's mute it. See what they're doing. Oh, bloody adverts. Come back to that in a second. There is an event happening in Bangkok, Thailand, which is fantastic. Another event happening at in Vertibio, House of Orcs, I'm guessing, if it's Orcs Jousting number 2. It'll probably be the guys at House of Orcs having a small event there, which is fantastic. So well done to Italy for getting another event going. There's an event happening in Schweiz in Lucerne, Germany, Austria, Liechtenstein. No, Switzerland. Ooh, I was going to say, bloody hell, Liechtenstein. Yeah, so that's happening in Switzerland. So an event happening in Switzerland. I've never heard of Schweiz, but that's great to see a 4-man local league happening in Switzerland. Fantastic. Is there one happening in Poland, is what Paul Spurgeon says. And in Poland, there is an event happening in Pepłów. What was that? That's a terrible pronunciation. Oh, wow, cool. Picture of their train station. Lovely. Peszła. I have no idea. An event happening in Poland, nonetheless. What else have we got? We've got another event happening in Warsaw in Poland on Sunday. We have War of the White Cloaks. This is the massive event happening in Leeds, which has reached 30 players now, I believe. Some people aren't signed up on stats, but yes, 30 players going to that event in Leeds. I might be seeing if I can make the time to go down myself as well. I have to check. But yes, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 events kicking off this week. Common sight to see 7 events, and I really hope most of them go well. I'll be looking at En route to the Citadel, certainly. Let's see if their stats are available. We have got a significant Lannister and Baratheon entry, low on Free Folk and low on Night's Watch, interestingly enough. Do have a look at that. There's 38 players in this event. Do have a little look through the lists. The French do things a little bit strange, so have a look at what they're running. Jack and Mysterious Prisoner. Hey. So, we'll leave it there for tonight, guys. That was an hour and 24 of my voice. Jesus Christ, you'll all have headaches. I do apologise in advance for anybody, or posthumously for anyone who has lost their hearing or has lost their sanity while listening to me tonight. But yes, I will see you all back next Monday with Carlo being returned, hopefully, and we will chat more about clocks and more about what's gone on and the various different events that have been running. Have a look at Leeds, see how that went, and see how everyone else is hanging out with the game. All right then, guys. Thank you very much for joining me alone today. And I will catch you next week. Take it easy.
Ready, aim, release!